I've already put down a piece of paper on the table. What I like to do is also to take a piece of scrap wood, perhaps something with kind of a slick material that makes it easier to clean up. And then I'm going to need my mold frame. These come in a variety of different ways. I love this one because it's a miniature version of a foundry mold, and most of my experience was in foundry beforehand, and so I understand this mold very well. There are other ones that are circular that work great too. So you need your mold, you need your clay, your Delft clay, which is really similar to a Petrobond, which is sand and oil, which makes for a really fine casting where it really looks like the original. Delft clay is similar. It's sand, oil, and a little bit of clay. And so this is previous sand that I've been using, and I just have it in this glass jar, but it comes in a metal jar. It does have a really strong scent, so you want to make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area where you're using it, mainly because that oil is in there, petroleum product, so you'll be able to smell it. I also have a couple of tools for ramming my mold, and we'll get back to that again. I have a couple of tools ready for setting up my sprue system or the channel that the metal will flow. I also have a little piece of mesh that I use as to sift the material through. I have parting powder, and you don't always have to use this, but depending on the mold it might be helpful. And I have taken a little parting powder and put it in a piece of pantyhose. Store it in a bag because it makes a mess. This could also be like baby powder. And then I have a couple of objects that I'm going to use to cast, so it's nice to have some things around to make. And then I'm going to use some gloves for whenever I'm working with the clay or the sand, and that's again because of that petroleum smell. So you will smell that, and it could cause sensitivity, I would guess, but make sure that you wear gloves, make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area, and then we'll be ready to go. So let's get to it. We're going to put our pattern in. And so I'm going to actually pour it down through here, and I'm going to use it the way that you would do a mold anyway. So I have my piece laying in the bottom, and then I'm going to screen my material, especially over the top of my metal piece. The benefit of screening the material is that it's going to put the finest sand on there with no imperfections, and then I can hope that that's going to be a really clean casting. So I usually try to get it all the way in that first layer, and then I can start putting sand in. Now, as far as like the things that you can make molds of, you really want to create things that you can take a two-part mold of it. So with toys, for instance, sometimes you can see the actual seam from the manufacturer of how they made it. But if I was to make this hippo, I would put the parting line in the middle. And that might be even for a whole nother video, but you want to be able to make it where just two parts can be taken out. And I think you'll be able to see it at the end of the video, what I mean by that. The instructions from ProCraft also even show how to do a ring and how to do kind of more complicated molds. So I have this rammed down all the way to the top, and then I'm going to take my wood tool and go kind of across on an angle and scrape the top to clean that off. So the next stage, you can kind of see how we did here. The next stage, I'm going to turn my cope over and I'm going to add my drag. At this point, if you wanted to use some parting powder, you certainly can. that'll help it part. I generally don't need it. I don't have anything that's overly sticky to where I have trouble getting it apart. But if you needed to, you just make it just snow just a little bit with our parting powder. And then I'll go ahead and put the drag on. And then again, I'm going to sift the first portions right over my pattern. So my original is going to be considered my pattern. And then once that has a nice sifting powder, as you can see, then I'm just going to go ahead and break up the sand. So my pattern right now is trapped inside, as it should be. Okay, so here we are, and let's flip that open. Okay, so now I need to take some of my tools and carefully, almost went through the other one, take out my original. Sometimes if you tap the middle, it'll kind of vibrate its way out. And you generally just kind of have to commit. I'm slow. Okay, and then I already have a pretty defined sprue system, but I'm going to go ahead and open that up a little bit more. And in this case, I'm just using like dowel rods or tubing to just establish where I want my sprue to be. The thing that's a little bit nerve-wracking about sand molds is what you can see me doing here. It can break really easily, especially around that sprue. Okay, so you can see my mold here. The other thing that I'm going to do, so I took out the rounded ends. This is technically the back. So the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put some vents. And so generally with this, I can vent straight out of the back. You know, if I already know that there's going to be a finding. In this case, that piece of copper tubing that I was telling you that I use, I just beveled the edge a little bit and made it kind of like a knife edge so that it can cut straight into it. I could also leave a vent coming straight up, you know, not through the mold this way, but coming straight up this way if I wanted to. But I like to vent so that the vent can go to the outside. With the circular mold, it'll tell you to kind of just vent a little bit all over, or you can vent radially, so you can make like little kind of sunshine bursts out of it. Let's see what happens if I just vent with one, and then we'll try like just one vent coming up here. And I'm going to make it deep enough so that it doesn't have to be done on both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and vent that to the outside too. With the expectation that it's going to make it hard for metal to flow, I opened up the entire sprue series and kind of forgot about my original ones, and I opened this up too. You can do that with a spoon or again with one of these tools, and then you can see that my vents are there. So now whenever I put the drag on, I want to really be able to see a big space for the metal to go.